Welcome to Biophilia, the love for nature in all her manifestations, from the tiniest organism to the greatest red giant floating in the farthest realm of the universe. With biophilia comes a restless curiosity, an urge to investigate and discover the elusive places where we meet nature, where she plays on our senses with colours and forms, perfumes and smells, the taste and touch of salty wind on the tongue. But much of nature is hidden from us, that we can neither see nor touch, like the one phenomenon that can be said to move us more than any other in our daily lives: sound. Sound, harnessed by human beings, delivered with generosity and emotion, is what we call music. And just as we use music to express parts of us that would otherwise be hidden, so too can we use technology to make visible much of nature's invisible world. In Biophilia, you will experience how the three come together: nature, music, technology. Listen, learn, and create. Now, forget the size of the human body. Remember that you are a gateway between the universal and the microscopic, the unseen forces that stir the depths of your innermost being, and nature who embraces you and all there is. We are on the brink of a revolution that will reunite humans with nature through new technological innovations. Until we get there, prepare, explore, biophilia.
Hello. Hello, Wired 2013, and thank you very much, David, for that wonderful introduction. Today it's all our privilege to be able to hear from the creator of Biophilia herself about the inspirations, the journey, and the future possibilities of this incredible revolution in music. So it's an honor to share the stage with one of the most creative and inspirational women of our time, and I would like you all to please welcome Björk to the stage. Sit down. Unless you want to do it standing. How do you feel?
That's quite classy too.
Yeah. So Björk, welcome, and thank you. Today I want to talk about three things with Björk: your inspirations and your working process, Biophilia and how that came to be, and beyond Biophilia, so how the project has evolved into what is really a living toolkit for learning about music. So let's start at the beginning. Your inspiration, nature, science and technology, how those have always been fundamental to you, even as a child.
Yes, I guess being brought up in Iceland, I've always had like a relationship with nature before I even knew that that's not common. So yeah, living in a capital in Europe, but you're still surrounded by mountains and ocean. And my relationship to music was probably strongest just walking outside to school and back. And it was like a 30-minute walk or something. And then I would sort of sing to myself. And so very quickly I started mapping out my melodies to landscapes. So I can sort of talk about this now like that, but at the time, obviously, I just thought it was very matter of fact, kind of common, normal thing to do. So that's sort of where my
you were composing music. You were writing lyrics. You were composing melodies to yourself while all of this on your way to school and on your way back home.
Yeah, I guess that's where it sort of started. But then I also went to music school from the age of 5 to 15. So I was being introduced to, the classical canon, Beethoven and Bach, and kind of like finding some of it interesting, but a lot of it kind of not really matching my own strong experience.
So you were kind of rebelling already at that age against that type of learning, against that kind of sort of dictatorial system of learning?
Yeah, I think it had become a little bit too academic and too removed from music, with a big M, and also being a girl in the 70s in Iceland. I mean, this was like for guys in Germany in the 1700s. So it was I wanted musicology for girls, Icelandic girls, you know, in the 20th century. That's sort of more that kind of thing. And yeah, so I think that was kind of the seed, the beginning also of biophilia in a certain way.
Incredible. Let's go to the beginning of the project cycle. So how did you begin to conceive of biophilia? How did this idea start emerging? It's about 4 years now since the beginning of the whole project cycle, or maybe even a little bit longer, but tell us about the beginning of it.
I think it was with touchscreens, and touchscreen had sort of arrived, for example, touchscreen called Lemires, and we used them on the Volta tour, which was, I think, from like 2007. Yeah. So we programmed a lot of the stuff of the Volta album on used touchscreen mostly to perform live. So while I was doing that tour, I was like really, gagging for it to actually be able to write with a touchscreen, not just perform. So I managed to, finish that tour, hold my breath, and the minute I got home, autumn 2008, I started kind of like, with the engineer I was working at the time, Damien Taylor, we started mapping out, the touchscreens and especially programmed for them patterns.
At the beginning, biophilia for you, though, you weren't sure how it was going to manifest itself. You were playing with this touchscreen. You knew that you were interested in intuitively being able to compose and alter beats and play with variable time signatures and key changes with the touchscreen technology. But iPads hadn't been invented then yet, or they hadn't certainly been released into the public domain for you to use. How was biophilia starting to manifest itself? I remember early incarnations you were talking about. A 3D movie, for instance. Yeah,
I think in the beginning I was working with the touchscreen quite selfishly because that was just sort of for me, for writing purposes. And then it was the idea, how do you share it? And in the beginning, it was supposed to be a music house. So I thought each song would be a room. And then it developed into, how about it being a movie? So then each song became a scene in a film. And then later, when we had been programming and basically I've written 10 songs that had 10 musicology elements and 10 different, that matched 10 different natural elements. The thing that started as 10 rooms in a music house and then became 10 scenes in a movie, it was very easy to then make it into 10 apps.
Yeah.
And then we had sort of finished programming and writing all the songs, and there was a different program for each, touchscreen program from each song.
Let's take one step back, because it's really interesting, because it's such a broad scope, this project. Let's take one step back and go to the songwriting process, because it starts with songs.
Yeah.
It all begins with the songs. So you started talking to scientists about nature, you went to the National Geographic Convention, to the research process, the real kind of fundamental learnings that you did to inspire the lyrics, the songs, and then the elements that the songs ascribed themselves to. Talk us a little bit about the research period. It's very fascinating to hear your stories about Nat Geo and MIT and stuff like that.
Yeah, I went, I think it was the summer 2009, June. I went to the National Geographic Explorer Convention, which is, I think, the most exciting thing I've done. I watched in 3 days 100 lectures.
I think they told me you got the world record for sitting through the most amount of speakers out of anybody that's ever visited. They even bestowed the honor of giving you an Explorer's, Explorer in Sound Award or something.
Yeah, I was just really, really inspired and just thought it was just a really different ways of approaching things, and probably also really refreshing for me, being in the pop world for so long. And I also started visiting MIT around the same time. And so I went for a couple of visits to them.
What were you looking for there? What was drawing you there, and what kind of things were you seeing there?
I wasn't really sure. It was more like a gut feeling. And it's been really the spirit of the Biophilia project has really been that many moments I have like 20 options in front of me and I can only pick one. And then again, that branches out in 20 options. And it's been really sort of like a very gut feeling kind of driven thing. But then in the end, I met many people from MIT and ended up working with one of them, doing one pendulum. But in the beginning, I didn't know that, you know.
You were searching, you were curious, you were trying to learn and discover more, and then you would find the thing that clicked with you and with the song and develop more intensely the relationship around one song with one creative partner or collaborator. Is that how it would work? I mean, we've got on the screens here a list of songs, and each corresponds to an element, so maybe it's worth, in order to kind of bring a little bit of clarity to the process, to talk through the stages of, say, Thunderbolt or Moon.
Yeah. So basically, there's 10 songs, and I started with mapping out the 10 basic musicology elements. Like, for example, there's chords, scales, rhythm, counterpoint, arpeggios. There's kind of like 10 of those. And then I found whatever is most similar in shape, in nature, to those musicology elements, and in order to make it simple for kids. So basically you are...
That's a key point.
Yeah.
Right? Keeping it simple was a key point for you, so it could become something that was accessible for all ages.
Yeah. So basically, for example, with arpeggios, which are like broken chords, I match them up with lightnings because they are most similar in shape. And then when you show a kid a lightning, and then especially like what we did with the Tesla coil, you can actually hear it as well, and it sounds the way it looks. Then kids can get a musicology element much quicker. It's just like they can get something in 2 minutes what would take them a year to learn in school. So as you can see the list, Thunderbolt, it's about arpeggios and lightnings, where you match up arpeggios and lightnings. And the next song is called Moon. And there, for example, I decided to match up musical sequences, which is what a lot of electronic music is made from, is sequences. And usually there are like 4 on the floor, they're very square shaped, you know, like do 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 do. So it's a lot of people criticize electronic music because it's not very flexible, it's not very human. So we decided to make a sequence that would be as, you know, flexible as possible. So it's basically based on the phases of the moon, and it can go from not just 4, but from 5 to up to 17 beats in the bar, depending on the moon. So you can change the moon. If it's full moon, then it gets maximum liquid or ocean, and then if you make it into new moon, it's only like 5 beats to the bar. So it's trying to make sort of connect musical sequencing to nature, that it's more an organic thing.
So much of what you just described now is about the visualization of sound, and you've described Biophilia being about the sound of sound. Mm-hmm. How does this not get in the way or interrupt you just trying to make a beautiful song coming from the heart, from yourself? Was there not a kind of a conflict where there was design over emotion, or did you find the two things managed to balance themselves out?
I think so, because it took me 5 years to do this. You can try a lot of things, and for you it doesn't click unless you have the right song with the right element, with the right musicology, with the right lyric. So I think that's where maybe I could especially do it in this project, because the whole theme of this project is about connecting the dots. Yeah. It's not so much about that each thing is original, or it's more about building bridges between things that haven't had bridges between them before.
Like what? Give us an example.
Like nature and technology, and like atoms and the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of almost ridiculous, kind of for me, like a joke, because it's so overreaching in unifying everything in the universe that it's all about bridges. It's sort of more about bridges than the actual things that it's being bridges are built
Well, the
between.
ambition was certainly grand, and the results are fundamentally changing the way that we think about music and the way that music's now being taught, and we'll come on to some of that later. But just to bring some of the visualization of sound to the audience, it would be great to look at some of these instruments that you invented. I mean, you invented these instruments. That means the technology existed, but you harnessed it, you presented it in a new way, you linked it and synced it to the music that you were writing for it, and then you used them in the performance capacity. So these are really significant steps, and it's not just one, it's one for each song. But here we have one which is the Tesla coil, the lightning. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Tesla coils were invented by Tesla. Thanks, that's very flattering. Thanks, Jefferson. But I actually...
So you didn't sing over the top of it and use it to make arpeggios.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, so we got Tesla coil. This was actually one of the most exciting, popular things in our educational programs, because kids would have the iPad with the Lightning app, and then they could make arpeggio bass lines and see it
Because it was controlled by MIDI, so it was controlled on the stage from a touchscreen by the programmer who was playing in the band with you. That's how it was performed. But during the music workshops, which happened while you were taking the show live, in the times where there was no performances happening in the spaces, you opened those up for music workshops.
Yeah.
And then kids could work with the laptops and interact with the machines, with the technology.
Yeah, I really wanted to empower the kids. So they sit there with a laptop and they see... something in nature they know, like the moon or the ocean or lightnings, and they can play with it, and then they can hear the structure that they just made. They can hear it, and so it's a really direct impact. And you could see the kids, in the space of a couple of weeks, they were learning what I learned myself in school in the space of 5 or 10 years. And also... What also you could really see, especially on kids who either have ADHD or all these, I don't know the titles of these in English.
I want to come back a little bit more to talking about the workshops and the impact it had on you seeing children working with the technology. But first go through some of the instruments, because it would be great to see more and hear you talk about each one a bit more.
Got a bit sidetracked.
The gravity harp, come on, it's an incredible machine.
Yeah, that was the instrument that I did with MIT, with Andy, and there were a few people there that I really connected with, and in the end I ended up getting, close with Andy. And for me, I thought the best way to explain counterpoint to a child is through gravity, because the relationship between counterpoint and melody, well, counterpoint is basically just a fancy name for bass line, it's like a relationship between them that is very similar, like the relationship between a human and gravity. And so to see a big pendulum swinging, and that is the bass line, and singing along with it, you sort of understand that they're similar. They're sort of like two magnets, sort of kind of related to each other, but they're different. And that, I think that was probably one of my favorite apps, Solstice. And
how was the process of developing it between you and MIT? How long did that take? Was there a lot of? Did you do many visits? Were there many prototypes? Give us a little insight into that.
Yeah, with every single instrument and every single app, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of emails, Skypes, visits. It sort of became all-consuming, thing, 24/7 for a few years, and exhausting, but very exciting.
And then there's the gamelan as well, which is another fabulous instrument, which is a sort of a hybrid that you created from an original a gamelan, which, if people don't know, is a sort of a Balinesian instrument, right? That's usually played by many players simultaneously.
Yeah, I guess
I've never heard of it before. You told me what it was.
Yeah, it's basically a pipe organ and a gamelest. Those were built by an Icelandic music organ builder, and I convinced him to do. Basically, it's MIDI controlled. So the pipe organ is basically a MIDI controlled pipe organ. So that's maybe not that unusual, but maybe the gamelest, and that was more of a aesthetic reason. I took my old Celeste because at that point there was no money, and we gutted it and put instead bronze bars, which is like the same, which is in gamelan, and then we MIDI controlled it, and that was more of an aesthetic decision. I couldn't work out. There was always the theme of bronze was through the whole project. I think it was a lot of it for emotional reasons. Also, the sort of music of the spheres.
Where did you find the organ?
That got specially built. That was a new thing. Yeah.
But you were modifying. You were scrapping, modifying, rebuilding instruments and prototyping them. And I remember seeing you using this organ and putting through MIDI song files from like I don't know, what were you playing, Brittany or Beyonce, and sort of doing karaoke sessions with it to try and see what it could do and what the potential of it was.
Yeah, we actually went to Puerto Rico for a year, and it was me and James Merry, who's sort of been has about 70 job titles on this project, and he's actually DJing your slideshow right now. And we ordered an eBay organ that was really cheap, kind of falling apart, and basically we were using how do you say it? WII, and trying all the Lemire programs like on it and writing all the songs. So basically I was writing my melodies while playing with my fingers on the Lemire, the different structure, like crystal structure for one song, and DNA structure for another song, and so on. And then it was being run through this very cheap eBay organ. And then on Friday nights, we got a bit bored and got a bit cabin fever. You came and visited us at that point, and the bottle of rum was brought out, and we sang a bit of Clash and Beyonce. It was very self-sufficient.
We haven't got a clip of you doing Clash or Beyonce, but we have got a clip of you experimenting with the Wii, and Damien Taylor was circuit bending the Nintendo and the Wii and trying to get you to intuitively experiment with, changing the time signatures of the music and being to intuitively influence the beats. And we've got a short clip of you doing that, which is a really rare behind-the-scenes piece of iPhone footage, which is really nice to share with the audience because it shows you at a working stage where most people never reveal. It's never been revealed before. So.
Me, my
really
night in the Caribbean, really suffering. Not.
What was the turning point for you when you knew that the songs were coming together? You'd started experimenting with the instruments that you were making. You were prototyping the pendulums. You were prototyping the gamelan, the gamelest. When did you realize it was going to work as an app? Was there a sort of turning point?
Yeah, it was kind of strange because from the beginning of the project, like I said, I was really run just by a gut feeling and got like 5,000 doors closed. Like nobody really wanted to find us. Everybody thought it was totally insane. And then in spring 2010, we had programmed for Lemire touchscreens 10 apps with, like I said before, and then the iPad came out. So it was like, wow, it was like some sort of a strange cosmic reward for my stubbornness. Because now it was almost easy or kind of stupid to not share the structures with the listeners, it would be silly to keep them to yourself, you know.
And how did you discover the people that you ended up working with? What was the process?
Well, I've got to thank Derek Burkett, my manager, for that, because he's also been incredible through all this, believing in it all. And he literally called up the people on the top 10 selling app list without telling me. And then a couple of days later, he told me that he called them and they were all up for it.
Brilliant.
I was just like, are you crazy? You know, kind of. And because I didn't, you know. But then they all came to Iceland. I remember it was around Halloween that year. After I've sort of sent them a manifesto first and description of like song by song.
So all 10 of them arrived in Reykjavik at the same time during Halloween, and you met them. What happened?
Yeah, it was a really interesting group of people because there was like an 18-year-old hacker from Arizona and all the way up to 70-year-old science teacher, you know, people that work with BBC and then people who came from Silicon Valley who were kind of my age and really, really different.
Tell us, did they all get on?
They really, really got on.
Okay.
And we all got into the same old restaurant, like my favorite restaurant in Iceland that I've been going to since I was a teenager. And we got it in the daytime, because they're not open in the daytime. So we went there for a few days, and everybody kind of brainstormed. And Apple actually told me afterwards that was unheard of, that because they were supposed to be competitors. And but they were actually sharing ideas and battering each other apps. And basically there, in the space of, I think, 5 days, I sort of distributed the songs to figure out who would be best at doing which song. And then towards the end of the week, because it was really difficult for us to finance this, nobody would finance it, they started coming to us one after the other and offered to do it in the old punk style, which was basically everybody works for free and then we share the profit.
It's an amazing
50-50.
spirit of meritocracy, and
Yeah.
and you brought that to the table, but so did they. And I think this spirit of inclusion is really powerful because a lot of work went into these apps, and we're going to see a medley of these apps now. Tell us, was one more difficult to make than another? Was there one that you just couldn't, you know, was just really impossible to get right?
Well, they sort of had different problems. I think the last one we sort of matched up with someone was Mutual Core. That was the one about teaching about chords. So you sort of have an accordion, which is sort of like a chord structure. So that took a while. But they were really different because you can, maybe I should talk to them as they go by.
Yeah.
So this is the thunderbolt, the lightning doing arpeggios. This is crystalline, which is more like a sort of normal computer game where you're doing the song structure. You get these diamonds as rewards. So you're learning about like song structure, like A, B, A, C. This one is about scales. So you have 99 scales of, you know, both, you know, European, African, Japanese. So it's sort of so it's not the sort of racism of black and white notes like the European, but it's like all the notes are equal. Very important. And this is DNA hollow. So this is made by incredible animation which is actually scientifically correct about DNA replication. This is about viruses multiplying, which is sort of about generative music. It's more like a musical instrument. The viruses attack the healthy cell, and they always win. And so they kind of got different, each different person, and also they all got different functions. So I really wanted it to celebrate the different musicology elements. This one is about notation. And we kind of went really deeply into all the different types of notation, that the European notation is not the only correct ones. So we have animated notation. This is the one I was telling you about earlier, about how you learn about chords. So sort of like a strata accordion, where you push together and you release tension, which is very much like the chords, and then you get an earthquake, and you go to the center of the planet, of course, and get a proper earthquake, and that's the chorus. So, yeah, this is the one, the pendulum one, about solstice and gravity, and this is probably the one where you can write most kind of your own song. You have basically 4 counterpoints and working independently, but all working together. Yeah, I think that's it. That was the fast forward.
That was
version.
great. A breakneck speed introduction to Biophilia's apps. Thank you, Björk. The music education aspect, is that a dream coming true for you?
Yeah, very much.
Considering what you said earlier about being at school and, you know, not having that education.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I sort of wanted to start my own music school, and then I guess just all these other things happened in between, like the pop thing. So it's amazing that it can happen now. And we have got a fund from Scandinavia, so everything's very non-profit. And we are now going to work with Scandinavian curriculum people for a couple of years and make it into a curriculum that can be applied to any school in the world. We're going to take, so far I've gone to 8 cities, and we have had the educational program in all these cities. And we've learned a lot from that. That was almost like the experiment. And with science teachers and with music teachers, and we've kind of collected all that experience in a pot. Also, it has been running now for 3 years in the Reykjavik mid-school curriculum.
Right.
So we get from that, and also from the National Library in Manhattan. So all these people, the part of the deal was that it would gather together all the experiences, which I'm now going to be making Biophilia 203 or 303, which is going to be like a curriculum that can travel independently without me and the instruments around the world. But we also got it translated to Android, which was a victory for us, because most of the schools that were interested were like underprivileged kids, like in Buenos Aires, but they all have like small mobile phones, so they can just turn up with that in school, and they can do the whole classes. Because we put all the extra curriculum stuff, we put it on a website for free, that the teachers can download stuff. So that's where we're at.
It's incredible, so much work and so much influence, and now Biophilia gets to live beyond just you physically touring with it, and it gets to grow, and that's also a big part of why I think you're here to talk about the end of a 4-year journey where you can look back and reflect, but also an opportunity to share your learning with people and see where other people can get involved in taking Biophilia further. So I wanted to end this by asking you all to give Björk a big round of applause for her talk.
Thank you.